Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today is a really special day. It is my almost 1-year anniversary for my YouTube channel. Tomorrow, which is Valentine's Day, will be the 1 year. It was the 1 year ago tomorrow that my first video premiered on YouTube. If you've gone back and watched my previous videos, you'll see I've come a long way. I'm not as shy in front of the camera. My sound is better, my lighting is better, all around a little bit better. Although the recipes are the same and they're still really good. Maybe eventually I'll go back and redo some of those videos and they'll have a little bit better quality. But for now, I'm okay with you guys seeing where I started, my humble beginnings. So what I'm going to do today to celebrate is I'm going to make some cupcakes. But we'll get to that in just a minute. I had asked people to submit some questions if you wanted to know anything or had any questions about anything. And I know a lot of people ask questions in the comments, and I try and get to those as fast as possible, especially if you have a question about a recipe that you want to make pretty soon. I try to get to those pretty quick. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, first of all, to Trent and Allie. They were the inspiration for this channel. A lot of you know who Trent and Allie are because you came over from their channel. But for those of you that don't know, Trent and Allie is my brother and sister-in-law. I'll put a link to their channel below. They also have a YouTube channel. And for a refresher, in case some people don't know how this came about or how my channel came about, is we were having a little family get-together at my mom's house, and I had made a gluten-free peach dessert. And my brother put me on the spot in front of his camera and said, you know, if you guys are interested in a gluten-free cooking channel, let us know. And there were so many responses. It was unbelievable. I really thought about it for a long time, and I thought, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know. I'm too nervous in front of a camera. I don't know. And then I thought about it and thought about it. I thought, you know, it might actually be kind of fun. So I got a camera and I started practicing in front of the camera. Some of those early videos are pretty terrible, but it was a good start, and I practiced and practiced and practiced. And then, you know, with the inspiration and encouragement from my brother and Allie, here I am today, 1 year in. And of course, it wouldn't be anything without all of you that are watching now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for people that have been here from the very beginning and grown with my channel. Thank you so much to people that have shared my content with your own social media and with your friends and family. I can't say thank you enough to everybody that has supported my channel, my patrons, and any way that you support at all, whether you just share with your neighbor or share with someone at the grocery store. Thank you so much. It's bringing people over here and it's helping my channel to grow. And it's so amazing to reach so many people all across the world. I'm still amazed by how many people from other countries watch my videos. And please continue to share. Please continue to share that with anybody that might feel that this is a useful thing or helpful, or if you just like to watch cooking shows and you don't really need to have a gluten-free or substitution of a recipe. But thank you guys so much for making this last year absolutely amazing. I will do my best to answer these questions. It might bring up more questions, but ask those, and I'll do my best to answer those too if I don't get a question answered here today. So one of my questions was, am I single? And some of you already know the answer to this, and no, I'm not single. I do have a husband, and he is amazing. He doesn't seem to think that it's a rough job having to eat all of my food. Although once in a while when I'm experimenting and it doesn't turn out so great, he's a good sport. And then some of you have asked if I have any children, and the answer to that is no. I have so many nieces and nephews that are absolutely wonderful. And so I get to be the fun aunt. And as some of you know, I have 2 cats that are very loud sometimes. I'll have to put a picture up of them so you can see what they look like, so then you'll be able to put a face to their voices when they're yelling so much in the background. Some of the other questions that I've gotten are some of my symptoms and what led me to be gluten-free. I did talk a little bit about that in my gluten-free story video, But I didn't go into a lot of detail. First of all, because there's kind of a lot of things. It's funny how when you're sick for so long, it didn't all happen at once. And it wasn't something that just happened overnight. And it was something that happened over so much time, and it evolved as it was happening. Sadly, you get used to being sick, and you get used to being symptomatic. You get used to having all of these symptoms. If you're diagnosed with something, you start to look backwards at your life, and you think, I wonder, at least with me, I do. I still do, for that matter. And you look back and you think, oh, well, maybe this was related to that all along, and we just didn't know. Nobody knew. For example, for me, anemia. When I was born, they told my mom that I was anemic. And that was just something that we figured it's just the way that it was. Some people are, some people aren't. You know, you don't look into it further unless it causes alarm or something like that. But it was just something that was always kind of there in the background, which actually evolved into being right front and center. I'll get to more of that in a minute. So I talked in my story video about how it took about 15 years to really get the final diagnosis. And I mentioned in that video that I was 19 when I started going to the doctor. But symptoms had started well before then. I remember being 15 and starting to experience a lot of stomach problems. You know, you could just call it a stomach ache if you want to, but it was more involved than just a stomach ache. Even now, and this is something that has still carried over, I can't stand to wear pants that rub right here. And anything that would come up to my waist was just really uncomfortable. And different jobs that I had where you have to wear a certain style of pants or things like that, or jeans, if I couldn't find jeans that sat lower, I would just go around with my pants unbuttoned because it was just too uncomfortable to have any pressure right there. And that is something that is still here today, it's the uncomfortable. I am really protective of that area. I just don't want anyone to touch it. Even when I'm in bed sleeping, I don't even put my own arms on my stomach. It's uncomfortable to have any kind of pressure on that area. I will say that part is still there. Just kind of the uncomfortable feeling is still there. And maybe it's just residual after effects of having to protect it for so many years. That symptom is one that evolved. Instead of just being an uncomfortable feeling here, it was just a miserable pain that literally went from here down to my hips, and it was just on fire and knife stabbing pains. And it's hard to really put into words how uncomfortable that was. And it was just pain, constant pain. And you get so used to it because it's not like you wake up one day with all of that pain. It just gradually gets worse and worse and worse. My oven is ready. We'll get to that in a minute. 350 is what it is set at. So over time, you get used to that stomach pain, or at least I did. And it got to where it was unbearable. And it got to where at night when I would get in bed and I would think, oh, it wasn't so bad today. It was a really good day. My pain wasn't unbearable today. Oh. And then you feel a little bit better about yourself. You're like, oh, that was manageable. Maybe tomorrow will be good too. I will try to tactfully explain this symptom. This is a cooking show. I won't go into too much detail. My bathroom habits were more than anybody. All the time. All day, every day. Some days worse than others. Some days not as many. But I was always going to the bathroom. So with going to the bathroom so much, there started to be other things that were coming with just going to the bathroom. And there was a lot of pain that was coming with it. And there started to be blood. And so that was, a big cause for alarm. And so I'd gone to the doctor. You think, well, maybe an ulcer, or you think, something else. Maybe I ate something really bad that day. Who knows? So I started going to the doctor for that. And of course, they do all of the testing that is quite embarrassing on some levels and invasive on some levels. But you do all of that testing, and of course, everything was fine. Oh, everything looks great. Okay. Well, it's not great. You know, there's a problem. You're not supposed to have, you know, things like this happening. And then it kind of got better for a little bit. And I look back at that and I think that must have been a really bad flare-up of something. But then it evolved into severe nausea all the time. And it would come and go, whether I'd eaten something or not, or before I was getting ready to eat something. That was a really strange thing. So I'd gone back to that same GI doctor, gastroenterologist doctor, and he wanted to give me some heartburn medicine. And still to this day, I've never had heartburn. It was the strangest thing to me of, why would you give me some heartburn medicine for nausea? And I don't know, maybe I don't know that much about heartburn, that's kind of a recommended treatment, but I didn't want to take medicine. I wanted to get more to the bottom of the problem than to just take a medication every single day for the rest of my life. And that symptom lasted for about a year. If I had eaten something and gotten that nausea feeling, I still have trouble eating similar foods today if it brings back that feeling. And bear in mind, I'm trying to give you the kind of the nutshell versions, because there were so many symptoms. At the time, I didn't think were related to anything, but when you look back on it as a whole, you can see where it was just this gradual decline into misery, really. So that was a really interesting symptom. And then it's funny, looking back over the years, I would get really sick, and then it would kind of taper off, and you never bounce back to what you were first. So even though you feel a lot better, it's still kind of miserable, but you feel better. So you think, oh, well, this is so much better than that. I can deal with this. And I drink coffee. And for the longest time, I couldn't drink coffee. It really seemed to be something that upset my stomach quite a bit. And I was starting to have some other things, like I wasn't sleeping well. Under a lot of stress, you know, I was working a lot. I was working 2 jobs. I was trying to eat pretty good. I had mentioned before, I didn't really ever go out to eat a lot because I couldn't afford it. I was already working 2 jobs. It was easier to make a meal stretch at home for a lot cheaper than it was to eat out. And so it was really boring and consistent. I would make one meal stretch as long as I could. So because I didn't eat out a lot, it wasn't that it was just a random fast food that maybe the grease didn't agree with you or something like that. It was, I ate at home 99% of the time. And most of the time I ate the same thing every day just because it was convenient. I was working so much, I didn't have time to make a big dinner. So I would make, for example, I would make 5 or 6 hamburger patties and a side of broccoli and make enough to last the entire week. Then I had dinner every single day. It was hard to determine what it was that was causing problems because I was so consistent with eating the same thing every day. And then it evolved into bloating, like serious bloating, to where I couldn't do my pants up, and it was just unbelievable bloating. And visible too, and you could see it and think, what is going on now? And my sister at the time had gotten into, had taken some classes and was learning about more natural ways of things. And she is really good at researching and investigating things. And she was taking all of the symptoms that I was telling her, and she was looking into some of her books and some interesting things that she had discovered. And this was back in probably 2002 or 2003. She gave me the unofficial diagnosis as leaky gut syndrome, which is really interesting because if you've done any research on celiac disease, they do mention that. So who knew? Who knew that she had discovered it before anybody else? But we didn't really know that it was the gluten that was the problem. So it had a few recommendations of what you could do for that particular condition, and one was eating yogurt every day. I know I use a lot of dairy in my recipes, but I don't like milk. There's some sitting right there. Let me rephrase that. I don't drink milk. I never have. I've never liked milk. Even now, I don't really care for the smell of it, but I use it a lot in cooking. And the other funny thing is, I love ice cream and I love cheese. But to just have a glass of milk with dinner, I've never ever liked milk, even chocolate milk. There's just nothing about it that is appealing to me at all. The reason I'm telling you about all of the milk is some of the information my sister had found that is eating yogurt every day will help balance out what's in your gut, you know, with the probiotics. That was a really hard thing to do. And I did it. I started eating yogurt every single day, and I hated every minute of it. And I would eat it as fast as I could because it was miserable. You know, just the little containers. Of course, back then I would get the ones that were full of sugar because they tasted better. Over all of these years, I don't buy the yogurt that has sugar in it now. I look for the exact opposite. Just plain whole milk yogurt that has no flavorings at all. But that was the only way that I could manage eating the yogurt. And that actually started to make a difference. Full of sugar that was probably not very much yogurt at all compared to what else was in it. But that made a big difference. But at the same time as that, because again, keep in mind, my bathroom habits were consistent. They were just constantly consistent all the time. And I just figured that was my body. And that's just what it was. You're given your body and you just live with the body that you have. So that was just how my body worked. And going as a female, you know, you go once a year to the doctor for your annual checkup for females. And every time they would do, you know, the regular blood draw and whatnot. And every time, every year, they would tell me, well, you're anemic. And I would say, okay, what does that mean? Should I do something? And in the beginning, they would say, well, no, it's not that low, but you know, it's there. It's low enough to mention it, but not low enough to do anything about really. So you just, whatever, keep an eye on it, see what happens next year. Well, then it started getting to be where it was getting lower that they actually wanted to do something. So they recommended to start taking some iron supplements, and I started taking those, which made my bathroom habits the other direction. And then I took that as an opportunity to start drinking coffee again. It was a win for me. Yay, I could start drinking coffee again. So I only did that for about a year, which is really interesting looking at it now because we never solved the problem. But it did bring my iron up. So I stopped taking it because the next time I went to the doctor, my levels were fine. So I stopped taking the iron without realizing that there was something lurking in the shadows that was making my iron low. So then for a while, things actually were better for a little bit. Every year going to the doctor after that, my iron started to go down again. And they would talk about it a little bit here and there. Well, it's a little bit low, but it's okay, you know. And then I, would say, well, I was taking iron for it a while ago, and I didn't really want to do that again. So we just kind of keep an eye on it and not really pay much attention. And I figured if the doctor's not so worried about it, I'm not worried about it either. So then it got to where I started having a lot of other symptoms. I was trying to make some better choices in my life of eating healthier. And I didn't eat that bad to begin with. My habit actually was to just not eat. I would just get up really early in the morning and go to work and just work. And then before I knew it, it was 2 in the afternoon and I was starving to death. And, along with those feelings, it's like lightheadedness and a little bit dizzy and those are miserable feelings. And so as I was getting older, it was harder to do that. And so I started making a really good effort to eat more regularly. And so I started eating oatmeal every day, and I started, a nice lunch and then a nice dinner. A lot of healthy things. You figure oatmeal is really good. I would eat a lot of apples and fruit and granola bars and then meat and vegetable for dinner. So it was what I thought was a pretty healthy, well-rounded meal. And it didn't take away my lightheaded and dizzy feelings. In fact, the strange thing is the more that I was eating, the worse my symptoms were getting. And so it evolved into, well, maybe I'm not eating enough. And so I started incorporating more food. Along with my morning oatmeal, I would have 2 hard-boiled eggs, and I would add in a whole bunch of nuts into my oatmeal for protein. And I'm eating yogurt every single morning as well. That's a really big breakfast. And then for lunches, a turkey sandwich and fruit, and I sometimes throw in some raw vegetables and just eat throughout the day and then eat a nice well-rounded meal at dinner. And so none of that was helping. As much as I was eating, and my symptoms were progressively getting worse, along with just feeling dizzy and lightheaded, I started feeling really shaky. almost uncontrollably shaky. I just felt like my hands were shaking so much. And I associated it with the being lightheaded and the dizziness. And that one was really scary, you know, when you're feeling like that. And at the time I was driving so much for a living, and again, working 2 jobs, not sleeping well, but feeling like I was eating really good. I was just feeling worse and worse and worse. And I've mentioned before that diabetes runs in my family. A lot of those symptoms are similar to what people experience before they're diagnosed with being diabetic. And so that was actually my first thought, and my concern is I've got to be diabetic. If all of these things that I'm experiencing within an hour of eating such a big breakfast or lunch or dinner, and all of these feelings are so bad, that's got to be it. And this is where I started going to many, many doctors, is everyone told me the exact same thing. Well, you're anemic, but everything else looks great. You're not diabetic, and everything else looks great. And I would say, well, why am I anemic? They would say, well, because you're a woman of childbearing age that has a heavy period. And I would look at them and I would say, well, you didn't ask me that question, first of all, and you don't know, so how can you assume that that is the cause, when if you had asked that question, you would know that that is not the case. I don't have that symptom. And so these were not the beginnings, but this was kind of solidifying my challenge with doctors, and that they weren't listening to me, and they were going off of whatever they were going off of. And so it just made my frustrations more. So I didn't go back to that doctor again, but my symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse, and new symptoms were coming up. Along with the lightheadedness and the dizzy, it was just a feeling of feeling awful. And I can't even put it into words. I felt terrible. And there were just so many things happening at once that there wasn't just one thing that was happening. It was just a general feeling awful. So I went to another doctor, which they did the exact same thing as the previous doctor. They did all the blood work. They did everything, you know, they did all of the exams, all of those other things, and the exact same result. Well, you're anemic. Well, why am I anemic? And they would give me the exact same answer. And I thought, where am I going wrong that I'm getting the exact same doctor that gave me the exact same answer? I changed doctors about 3 or 4 more times after that. Meanwhile, my stomach pains were getting worse, and my bathroom habits were getting more and more frequent. I just associated that everything was just shutting down. Like my entire body was just falling apart, and it's just one more thing. And it doesn't matter because I have to go to work. I have to pay my bills. So you just suffer through and go about your day. So about 4 or 5 more doctors that all gave me the same answer, and I just decided to stop going to doctors. No one is giving me a different answer. No one was willing to look into anything else. So what is the point? I couldn't afford to keep going to the doctor and having the same thing done at every single doctor and get the same exact answer, when I knew that there was more to it than just that. But then you also second guess yourself and wonder, maybe it's all in my head. Maybe I've lost my mind and all of this is in my head, and who knows what is happening now. So then I was at my exam with my female doctor. He, of course, said the same thing that everyone else had said, well, you're anemic. And keep in mind, this was over the span of about 3 or 4 years that I was going to all of these doctors. So, of course, during that visit, they do some blood work, and he said the exact same thing. Well, you're anemic. And I let him have it. I yelled at him and I said, that's what everyone else says. No one is listening to me. Go figure it out, because no one else will figure it out. If you're going to sit here and tell me, then you find out why it is happening, because no one else is looking into it. No one else seems to think it's a problem, but clearly it's low enough now that it is a problem. So, of course, then I felt terrible, and because I didn't mean to yell at him. It wasn't his fault. So he went back and looked at my history for the last 12 years and realized how drastic my iron levels were declining. And he came back in the room with all of his pages, and he was like, oh, this isn't good. This isn't good. So then I sat there and I was like, oh, finally somebody's gonna do something about it. And then I was even more afraid, because I thought, oh, I'm really gonna die. I'm really gonna die now. It's a final diagnosis. There's no saving me because it's been so long. I'm done for. So then I left his office, and we had scheduled a couple of other appointments, and he had referred me to a couple of other specialists. And meanwhile, with the relief that I felt that I actually had appointments coming up with some specialists, it was also a feeling of dread of, you know, it's going to be a really serious thing. It's going to be really bad. And meanwhile, feeling worse and worse every day. And I know it sounds really dramatic to say this, but I felt like I was dying. And I felt like I was going to die. And I couldn't even pinpoint exactly what part of me felt like it was dying. All of it felt like I was dying. I would go to bed every single night, and I would think, okay, here we go. I don't think I'm going to make it. And then I'd wake up the next morning, and I'd wake up and I'd lay there and think, oh, I'm still alive. I guess I'll go to work. So anyway, I felt like I was dying. And the appointment that my doctor had sent me to for the specialist was a hematologist, which is a blood specialist. And it's interesting to look back now thinking that we were blaming almost everything on being anemic when there was more going on, but that was the main focus that we were concerned about, or that he was concerned about. At this point, I was just concerned that I wouldn't live to make it to my appointment. So while I was waiting, other symptoms started coming about. And those ones were really interesting and really weird. And again, you think you're crazy, or at least I thought I was crazy. I thought my body is falling apart, I'm losing my mind, and I don't even know what is happening. And then I'm just gonna die, and then what was the point of anything? Along with the really shaking hands and the lightheadedness and the dizziness, those had never gone away. And I had mentioned that I was eating more, and I was trying to double almost what I was eating every single meal. And at the same time, the bathroom habits were getting more and more frequent, and I was also losing weight. And at first I didn't notice how much weight I had lost because the job that I had, I wore scrubs. I guess a little side note here is I'm in the medical field, and I've been in the medical field for my entire adult life. And so I wore scrubs every day. And if you wear scrubs, they're kind of baggy, and it's a drawstring waist, and so you don't really notice if they're baggy or if they're getting looser. It's just they fit the same regardless of how much you weigh, really. So I didn't really notice how much weight I had lost until a rare opportunity to wear real clothes, and how baggy my clothes had become. And so my weight had dropped so much, and then so many people had started to notice, you're losing weight, you must be on an amazing diet. And I think to myself, well, it's not a good thing, I'm dying. I'm dying, and you're complimenting me on that I look great. You know, it was a really weird thing to experience. So along with my shaking hands and dizziness and lightheadedness, my fingers were starting to go numb. And it was just my ring finger and my pinky fingers, and then parts of my arms. And it was such a strange feeling. The only way that I can describe it is that my arms couldn't find each other. And maybe this makes sense to somebody else, but I felt like my arms were not a part of my body, and that they couldn't find each other to be together. I don't even know how else to explain it. And it was just such the strangest thing. And I thought, what is happening with that? These were all staying. And so where in years past, like my symptoms would kind of come and go and get better for a little bit, all of these in the last, couple of years before my diagnosis were coming and they were staying. And this is where everything was compiling. So then my face started going numb, parts of my face. And it was this part of my nose. And it was just the strangest thing. It was from here just down to here. Just this weird little random thing. And I had gone to the dentist, and I thought maybe they hit a nerve, maybe something happened, that would happen, but that was a few weeks ago. Like, how could that be a delayed reaction? But just this weird thing right here. Along with all of that, which I later learned the name for was brain fog, and I really thought I was losing my mind at that point. And that was just the most random, anytime, any day, it didn't matter. It would just come on. And sometimes it would stay for 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. One of the most miserable feelings for sure. And the best way that I can describe to you how it felt for me was take your brain and what you see out of your eyes, and you just, you're just doing your everyday thing, living your life. And you take a cotton ball and you put a cotton ball on your head to where it comes down to here. So you have a cotton ball hat, and then you take away your peripheral vision, so where you can't see out the side, but then your vision goes tunnel vision. So now you have a cotton ball hat and you have tunnel vision and you can't see out the sides. And then it almost feels like it affects your hearing to where everything's kind of muffled. So that to me is what my brain fog felt like. And one of the most miserable things, really scary, especially if you're driving, you know, and that happens and you don't know what to do. You don't know if you should pull over, or, you know, you're not sure what to do. Especially if it lasts for a really long time. And then it feels like it takes your brain away to where you can't think clearly. Well, obviously, because you can't see, you can't hear, and you have cotton in your head. But you really, everything just feels fuzzy, and then it's scary because then you're questioning what you're doing. And you feel like it doesn't really make sense. You can't really put it into words to describe it, but then you're not sure that you've lost your mind. I don't know if any of this is making any sense. I'm just trying to explain to you what it felt like for me. It makes sense to me, but it was in my body. So that one, again, over the last, you know, couple of years, like all of these were just coming and staying. And when they all happened at the same time, it's a pretty miserable thing. And of course, you know, all of the things run through your mind. Well, I've got MS. I really do have diabetes. They just couldn't find it. I've got something worse. I've got a brain tumor. I've got cancer. I've got all of these things that you kind of think that you know start running through your head. Well, what else is happening to me? So waiting for the hematologist appointment, all of that was happening. And I was feeling worse and worse and worse. I was losing more and more weight. And I was down to 100 pounds. And just to give you a reference, I'm about 120 right now. So I didn't have a lot to lose to begin with. And so to drop that much weight, it was really unsettling, which I've later realized that when you lose that much weight, that can also cause some of the symptoms that you experience. Because my body was literally dying. I started writing, I had written a living will. I really didn't think I was going to make it. So you prepare yourself for that, which I did. Even now, it's still kind of emotional. When you're ready to die, I wasn't ready to die, but I was prepared to die because I didn't feel like there was any hope left. I felt like it was too late and it had been too long, and I was just going to this one last doctor's appointment to give me the final diagnosis that it was, in fact, I was going to die. So I go to the doctor, and it was a 4-hour-long event, and they had so much paperwork, and it was a really nice change from doctors that didn't ask me any questions and just gave me the answer of what they assumed was wrong with me without even finding out for sure, where this was a totally different change of they asked me a bazillion questions, and they were really interested in my answers. And I had so many symptoms that I had written them all down because I was afraid. I felt like this might be my last chance. And so I had written down everything, and I took my notebook, and I had so many questions that I had written down. It felt like it was my last chance to actually, hopefully, maybe get some answers. And I didn't want to leave anything out. And I didn't want to feel like leaving the doctor's office, I would forget to mention something. So I really wanted to make sure that I was prepared for this appointment. Some of what I felt like were small, insignificant things they seemed really interested in. Other ones, they didn't seem as interested. And to give you an example of being anemic, the average person, when you have your blood drawn, the average iron level is a 9. And mine was registering at a 1. You know, when I first got there, they took my blood, and then while we were doing all the other things, they were waiting for the labs to come back. And so when those came back, it was such an interesting change to where you're getting to know the doctor and the physician assistant, and you're kind of joking, and you're, you know, just interacting and having conversations while you do all the testing. And then the drastic change from that to when my lab results came back, and they came in and they were just grim-faced, and they had their papers, and they were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, "You just saw me 20 minutes ago. Like, I'm the same, you know." But they said, they're like, "Your iron is at a 1. And we don't even think it's that high. We just think that's as high as our machine will register. And I just sat there and I was like, okay, you know, finally somebody is doing some investigation, but I feel the same I did, you know, 10 minutes ago. I'm still just here. And then they were like, are you tired? And so I work 2 full-time jobs. I'm always tired. And let me tell you a little bit about that. I could take a nap anywhere. I could pull over in my car and take a nap anytime, anywhere. It didn't matter. And looking back, anytime we had a family get-together, I would always take a nap. I would always excuse myself to go take a nap. There were a lot of times we'd go places and I would wait in the car because I didn't want to go into the mall, and I would take a nap. So always taking a nap. And I was always tired. But I just figured, I work 2 full-time jobs. That makes anyone tired. So then the doctor said, well, we think this is what you've got. And at first he called it sprue. And he said, we think you have sprue. And then he said, well, celiac disease, which neither I've never heard of at that time. So anyway, so they told me then how low my iron was. And I said, well, if my iron's that low, what is everything else? You know, it can't just be the iron. It's got to be everything else is low. But they had also tested me for the antibodies for celiac disease. As low as my iron was, my antibodies for celiac disease were astronomically high. At that point, he said higher than he'd ever seen. And I was like, well, what does that mean? You know, and they said, well, we'll get some information for you. And then that's where the doctor, you know, gave me his 27 pages and told me this is the information that I can find. You can figure out more on your own than what I can offer you here. So then he also wanted me to do a couple of other things besides going on a gluten-free diet. He wanted me to do a food journal. And it wasn't just a food journal, it was a symptom journal, a bathroom habit journal, and of course my eating journal. And I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. It was stupid. A waste of time. And he also wanted me to do a 6-hour IV infusion of iron. If you remember, I didn't even like taking the little iron supplements, let alone 6-hour IV infusion of iron. Not to mention fear and anxiety of what is that going to do to my body? And I asked him, I was like, wait a minute, you take me that has been anemic my entire life, literally from birth. What is going to happen in 6 hours if you give me the normal amount that an adult person is supposed to have? And worst case scenario is going through my mind and thinking, wait a minute, for something I've never had a normal level of, and in 6 hours you're going to give it all to me, what kind of a shock to my system will that be? Like, that was scary. And so I told him, I said, I'm not doing that. Give me another option. So he told me to get the highest iron supplement that I could, which meant going to a compound pharmacy, because just over the counter, you couldn't get the amount that he wanted me to take. And so compound pharmacies where they make it for you, the particular equivalents. And he said, I'll see you in 3 months. You have 3 months. I'll make you a deal. Go gluten-free, write it all down. Here, you know, make your journal and start taking these iron supplements. And in 3 months, we'll see what your levels are and go from there. If they are not better, then we'll do the iron infusion. And I said, I'll take the 3 months and I'll do this, but I'm probably not going to do the IV infusion because that was really scary to me. And so I would do whatever I could to avoid that. But regardless of what my test results were, I wasn't going to do that option. That was not an option for me. So I went on my way. And as you know from my other video, I went and had a crappy food court meal. And that was my last gluten-free meal. And so back to my food journal, I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of. And, you know, I had gotten a notebook and day 1. And I started. In the beginning, day 1 took up almost 2 pages of what I ate, what my symptoms were, how I was feeling. I also put in, you know, what I was, you know, my iron supplements that I was taking, all of that. So day 1, you know, and then I just, every single day, I did it. I wrote it down every single day. I was still working 2 full-time jobs, and it was going on. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to live, maybe, you know, still have to go to work. Symptoms were still there. And so just on a regular daily basis, I didn't notice. It was really discouraging. I still felt like I was going to die. I didn't feel like anything was better. I felt like it was too late. You know, they had finally figured it out too late. Hopefully, maybe having a diagnosis. I was still in my 3-month trial period to see what would happen, if it would help or not. So I really didn't have an actual diagnosis just yet. It was a really good assumption. And now I had to figure out a whole new way of eating. And not just eating, but chapstick. Is my chapstick gluten-free? And I'll tell you, that first day going home, and you just stand in your kitchen, and you open the fridge, and you start thinking, and you start looking at things, and I'm like, well, okay, you know, so you start making the changes. And then it evolves into like really stupid things where, God, is hairspray gluten-free? And I know it sounds stupid, but when you have hairspray, you spray and it gets into your mouth, like all of these little things, will that make a difference? I don't know. I put my pen in my mouth. I hope my pen's gluten-free. Now, all of these things that you think about that you never thought about before, now all of a sudden you have to think about. It's just kind of funny, but you do have to think about those things. So then my 3-month trial period was coming to an end, and it was a lot of different things. I kept my food journal every single day, and I had changed my eating habits. And looking back, I feel like that was maybe a little bit of a nice distraction, because it gave me something else to focus on besides just feeling terrible. It gave me something else to focus on of learning a new way to eat and finding ingredients and just going from there. So my appointment was coming up for my 3 months, and I felt like I wanted to be prepared again for my appointment and write down any questions that I had and maybe any lingering symptoms that had not resolved, and just kind of have my questions answered when I go and talk to the doctor what my next step is going to be. So I decided to review my food journal, and I honestly, in that 3 months, I didn't even look at it because I thought it was stupid. And I wasn't going to waste my time reading back through it. I knew what I was feeling. I didn't need to read it on paper. I knew how crappy I was feeling. And so I went back and I started at day 1. And almost 2 pages of symptoms. And that was the first light bulb that went off in my head. And I was like, I'm better. I'm so much better. But then it was also realizing I really was dying for sure. Like, how did I even live? Because I was going to the bathroom more than 20 times a day. And I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't have believed it either unless I hadn't seen it written on that paper. And then I started thinking back, and I was like, how does anybody go to the bathroom that many times a day? But I was, sometimes more. And then you realize how sick you really were, or how sick I really was. So then reading through all of my symptoms that I had, I would start thinking, whoa, that one is gone, and that one's gone, and well, this one's still here, but those ones are gone. I'd forgotten all about that one. Oh, I'm so glad that one's gone. So then I started flipping through more, and it ended up being the most useful thing that I could have ever done. And then I was so glad that I had stuck with it. Even though I thought it was stupid, I'm glad that I'm stubborn, and I stuck with it. It ended up being such a useful thing. I still have it. I haven't looked at it in many years, but I still have it because I just want to make sure that I can look back and see how far I've come. So then I'm getting ready to go back to my doctor. I've got my list, and I'm feeling so much better because I've got all of these things, which I now added to my list to show the doctor, look at all these things that are better. And also in that time, I gained 30 pounds. 3 months, that's 10 pounds a month, 30 pounds. My pants didn't fit anymore. Luckily, my scrubs still fit, which was nice because I didn't have to buy new work clothes. But none of my regular street clothes would fit anymore. But anyways, I had seen my sister, and she told me, she's like, you actually have hips. You don't look like this straight up and down, skeleton person. You actually have a figure. You have hips. So I take my new 30-pound heavier body and go back to the doctor. And of course they do all the blood work, weight, all of those things. And of course their numbers are showing what I already knew too, is that I've gained weight. And then they brought in my lab results, and the doctor, he just shook his head. And he said, if I didn't know that this was you, I wouldn't believe that this was you. And I said, all right. And I think to give credit to doctors, I think there are a lot of people that wouldn't do the recommended treatment plan, which I'm actually one of them. I told you I wouldn't do the IV infusion, and I was going to stick with that. But I was dedicated to my gluten-free diet. I think he was impressed that I had actually stuck with it, and not once did I cheat. Not once. To me, you know, a little treat or a cupcake or something like that would not be worth it. I was trying to live. I didn't want to do anything that might skew my results of trying to discover what my diagnosis was. So I didn't need the IV infusion anymore because my iron levels were great. Other levels had come up and were great. Of course, my weight, I wasn't super happy about that, but you know, I have since kind of evened out, and I'm pretty happy. It feels like a healthy weight to me, and my clothes fit, so that's always a plus. That is basically how I came to be where I am now. There was a really long time to tell you all of those things. Even though it's been so many years, I do get a little bit emotional when I talk about it, because I really didn't think I was going to make it. Along with all of those things and feeling that I was going to make it, and I finally got a diagnosis, it was a new challenge, is to start living again. And I felt like for so long I was just trying to live and trying to live, but at the same time I was prepared to die. That was a really big challenge to come back from, is to start looking towards the future. I had told my boss so many times, if I don't show up to work one day, you know that I'll have died. I really felt that bad. And it's still hard to put into words sometimes. Maybe some of my challenges will help you. You know, other parts that had come along. I also, in my other video of my story, I talked about, you know, all of the other challenges that came with going gluten-free and looking for products and things like that. And I will say now, this will be my 11th year of being gluten-free. Almost all of those symptoms are gone. When you know your body, you can tell when you've been contaminated, I guess is the right word to use, where certain things will come back, and maybe not in full force, but then you sit and you think, oh, I remember this one, and why did this one have to come back? I will say that having to look back on where you were and how far you've come, it's a really encouraging thing. And that's just my story. And I in the years since then, I have met more people that are gluten-free. In the beginning, I only knew one person, and I didn't know that person very well, and so it's not like I could, you know, ask questions or symptoms. You know, sometimes they're personal symptoms that people don't want to talk about. But in all of these years, I have met more people, and I've been able to have discussions with people. And a lot of us have similar symptoms, and some of us have ones that others don't. It's a really good feeling to know that we're not alone, and that we're not crazy, and that our symptoms aren't in our head. And I think one of the most important things is to know your own body. I think our bodies have a way of telling us things that we don't even know, and we don't pay attention to. And even if we lie to ourselves sometimes, you know, I think we all lie to our bodies. I lied to myself a lot in the beginning of, oh, I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna die. It's not that bad. I can handle this. This symptom went away, and this one's not very pleasant, but this one's better than that one, so I'm okay. You know, we tell ourselves these things all the time until it gets to where you can't lie about it anymore, and you have to face your own body and what your body is doing to you. So I don't know if any of all of this is anything that would be helpful or not, and I'm sorry it was so long. Let's continue on, and I promise I will start making these cupcakes very soon. The nice thing is everything will be well past room temperature, which is actually a question I get sometimes, is why it needs to be at room temperature. And I keep my gluten-free flour in the fridge. It mixes up so much better when it's room temperature. And same with eggs, and of course butter and other things. They mix up so much better than when they're ice cold out of the fridge, unless the recipe calls for it to be cold. So there's that answer, if you were ever wondering. So now back to my questions. Someone had asked about tips that might be helpful. I feel like I just answered those, where just listen to your body and talk to other people. We all have a similar experience, and whether it's because of celiac disease or there are other conditions out there that benefit from a gluten-free diet, which in some cases we've all had similar symptoms. So it makes me wonder. I truly do believe too, in some respects, it isn't actually the food. It's what's been done to the food. Whether it's highly processed or the way things are grown nowadays is different than what it would have been 100 years ago. And so it's really interesting. And I've even heard in other countries, sometimes people that can't eat things here in the United States can eat the same product in another country because it's processed differently. So there's so many different variables that really go into it. But new information is coming out every single day that is helpful, and we have tools to research that we didn't have before. And I do find it so helpful to hear your stories. It does make us feel like we're not alone. And so many of us have overcome so many awful, awful symptoms to live through. And we're still here. Some of my other questions, let's see here. So if I make a big pan of lasagna, for example, which very, very soon that will be a video, I'll make it for my whole family and they enjoy it too. And most times they can't tell that it's gluten-free. And that's a really nice compliment for me. And it's also a compliment for gluten-free products that have come so far and are better. And they taste better and they cook better and all of those things. So it really does make it enjoyable for everybody to eat my recipes. And I've gotten so many compliments where people, no, this isn't gluten-free. It is gluten-free. No, it can't be. Gluten-free things are terrible. And I know they are terrible, but this is mine and it's gluten-free and it's really good. And I know sometimes some of my recipes, they don't look like an amazing picture in an amazing cookbook or something like that, but it's actually what it will look like. And I want to show you that it does work. And even though it's not the prettiest cupcake that you might have ever seen, it tastes really good. If you have to sacrifice looks for taste, I'm all for it. You want it to look nice. You want it to be a nice, we eat with our eyes first. But if you can't get your cupcake to rise just right, that's fine by me. As long as it tastes good, I'm fine with a stinking cupcake. So then let's see here. I had another question, which I kind of answered in my story video, but I'll kind of give a refresher here. Is it difficult to find restaurants or caterers and store-bought foods and things like that? Yes and no. I still only rarely ever eat out. And there's still just, I mentioned 4 in that video. And there's still about 4 places that I'll go. It's so rare that I actually do eat out. The 2 places that I eat out the most is, one is Costa Vida. They are really mindful of gluten-free eaters at their restaurant, and not sponsored, by the way, for either of these places that I'm going to mention. I really do appreciate that they make the effort. In-N-Out, a hamburger place, but they're really mindful about providing things that are gluten-free. And I can eat their French fries. I missed French fries for a long time. Sometimes I would go to a burger place in the beginning. Oh, let's take just Wendy's, for example. And, you're out on a family outing or a vacation or something, and you want to stop and get a hamburger. And my sister, we used to call it my burger salad, because you would just go in and I just want a hamburger patty with some lettuce and a tomato. That's all I want. Don't put any sauce. Don't do anything else. Just a dry hamburger with lettuce and tomato. And that was it. And they'd give it to me in a little container, and I'd take my knife and my fork and I would call it my burger salad. That was something that I would have once in a while. But I really don't eat out very much. As I mentioned before, I never really ate out very much. Even as a kid, we didn't go out to eat very much. So that was a really easy thing to give up. And I still, even now, I still have no problem taking my lunchbox to a restaurant. As for caterers, the funny thing is usually for big parties, I do a lot of the cooking. And I've gotten to where it's okay. I have no problem going to a huge party. Oh, let's say like a wedding, for example. You go to a wedding, I have no trouble just visiting with people. And, you kind of get looks, or I did in the beginning. Now people are used to me not eating at family events. I have no problem not eating. And I have no problem explaining why. There are family parties that we have sometimes where even if I make it myself and it's a buffet, for example, and people will bring their own dishes, and I tell people, I say, I'm just one person. Don't make the effort to make it all gluten-free for just me. It's fine. You just make it for you, and then everyone else can enjoy it too. And then what I'll do for a buffet is I will set everything up from gluten-free and then have all of the gluten-y stuff at the other end. And I actually will have people start at the gluten-free end. And the reason I do that is there's no risk or less of a risk for cross-contamination. If people start at that end and then move down, and then if you spill something from one dish to another, my gluten-free stuff is has stayed gluten-free. And there's just little tricks that I've learned that's what I do. If I make something just for myself, I will actually put that clear at the other end of the kitchen and put everything else over here. And then I will just secretly go to my little side, and then we all have the same thing. Mine is just 100% away from everything else. And so that's a little trick. As for store-bought foods, there's a lot more options now with store-bought foods than there used to be, which is something interesting too. Is, as I mentioned before, is growing up is we've always made things homemade, and which is what I still do today. And so I never really bought store-bought things to begin with. Let's talk about a frozen pizza, for example, or frozen waffles. Also coming very soon, by the way. But just little convenience foods like that you would just bring home and throw in the oven. I never really bought those to begin with. Even though the convenience was there, I just wasn't raised that way. And I love the cooking process. I never really bought stuff like that because I liked my homemade version better before gluten-free and now. As you've seen in some of my other recipes, most of them are not dairy-free. I'm not very experienced with dairy-free cooking. I have used a lot of coconut oil and coconut cream in recipes, and so I have a good idea of how it works. Very soon I'm going to start exploring more dairy-free options. I think it's a really useful thing, and so hopefully very soon I'll be able to bring you some more dairy-free choices. I want to get some dairy-free butter and see how that works in my recipes, and then I'd be able to let you know that it does work. And if it doesn't work, you might have an option that would fix that problem. So look for that coming very soon. I had mentioned in my flour video and my story video, and I'm going to mention it here now, is there was a magazine that really made a lot of difference for me when I first went gluten-free. It has since changed names, and I have one right here. This one is called Simply Gluten-Free and More. It is a really amazing magazine, and it has a section on substitutions. Let me find it here. As I mentioned before, it had a flour recipe of what you could use and what you could use it for, what different types of flours that you would need to make your own mix, and where to use it, things like that. And that was so helpful and useful for me in the very beginning. And even 11 years in now, I'm almost 11 years gluten-free, we still have things to learn. New information is coming out. People are experimenting with recipes. So I always think it's helpful to just keep learning. So there's a kind of a 2-page spread here that it has so many substitutions, and it has so many different options, and dairy-free options in here as well. Nut-free options. There's just so much useful information right here. And then, of course, they have recipes that will use all of these options and give you other options that you could swap out if you need to. I'll put a link for this below. You can also go to their website. But such a helpful tool to have. So give this a look. But it helped me so much in the beginning. And they have amazing recipes. And hopefully it will help you too.